Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Today, this session is for those of you who have small or mid-sized security teams but have big data problems that you need to be solving. So if that is you, hopefully this session is going to be valuable for you. My name is Alan Cox. I'm the Senior Director of Security and IT at MyFitnessPal. I've been with MyFitnessPal for 4 years as of last week. Prior to that, as Max mentioned, I was at Blizzard Entertainment where I ran the Security Operations Center and was also a cyber warfare officer in the United States Air Force where I did detection and response. My LinkedIn, if you want to read more about my background, is there. Max tried to get me to put a QR code up here, but I knew you all wouldn't scan it, because you're good security practitioners. So the true believers are going to type in my name into the URL, and then you can find me there. I have 2 small kids. That takes up a lot of my time these days. I feel my technical skills atrophy every moment of every day as a physical pain. But it's OK. They'll come back someday, maybe. I'm a trained vocalist and a pianist, and also provided for you with zero context. I sang at the funeral of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best friend. With that, let's talk a little bit about MyFitnessPal. So MyFitnessPal is the world's leading nutrition and calorie counting app. You've probably seen our logo if you haven't heard our name. If you've ever been on an app store or the Google Play Store, I'd be very surprised if you haven't seen the Dancer logo. So what does that mean? We're a fairly small business. We have less than 300 employees. We divested from Under Armour 4 years ago, brought the technology along, didn't bring all the business processes. I joined the team to build out the security and IT functions from a green field. But we had a big data problem because we just have a lot of users, a lot of brand recognition. We have 15 million monthly active users. That's a big surface for a fairly small business. And so the question for me was, how do we start to scale security for a mid-sized business that has this really large data problem with all of these users? And I think one of the first places I went was automation, but then shortly following that, the next place was how do we start to centrally aggregate all of this data? And we started to look at a couple of different SIEM solutions to get us that centralized aggregation. We evaluated Splunk and Sumo Logic and Devo, and then we looked at some newer players like Hunter's AI. And kind of as we went through that evaluation process, we ended up deciding Splunk was the best fit for us. And my senior security engineer and myself had about 20 years of combined Splunk experience. So it was a nice, warm, fuzzy blanket for us to put on and feel like we were going to be able to get a lot of value initially. So, and it was, for the most part. But as we worked through kind of our initial 3 years with the program and Splunk, we started to identify some pain points with our team at MyFitnessPal. So we have 3 IT security folks at MyFitnessPal, if I'm including myself. And as I mentioned, I maybe am not the greatest technical resource in the world anymore. So really 2 people that are working in our platform every day. And the pain points we started to identify were really around administrative overhead. It was just a lot of work for us to maintain Splunk. When I was at Blizzard, we had 3 people who were responsible for maintaining Splunk. That was their entire job, was maintaining Splunk. And that is larger than my security team at MyFitnessPal. So we really did not have the time and cycles to be spending trying to administer the tool. A lot of that came from woes with our technical add-ons. For those of you not familiar with Splunk, when you want to bring in data enrichment from external sources, you install that organization's technical add-on. So if we wanted to use Okta data, we would pull the technical add-on from Okta, written by Okta. If we wanted threat intelligence enrichment from Flashpoint, we would use Flashpoint's technical add-on. But that means they're not centrally QA'd by Splunk. They are potentially have issues, bugs, they aren't running in an optimized fashion. And so we ended up playing a lot of compute limit Tetris. We had a certain amount of compute threshold that we could use in our Splunk instance, and sometimes we would start exceeding that on our ingest, or there would be a lookup table that would be generated by one of our technical add-ons, and it was just very expensive. And so we would either start shutting those things off, we'd rewrite them ourselves, or we'd have to bring in Splunk professional services to try to help us identify ways that we could use our compute more efficiently. And this just all took a lot of time and effort to be constantly reviewing that compute limit dashboard. The next thing we identified were some tool silos. Our platform engineering team and our development teams were using Datadog for production observability and everything that was happening in our production environment. We, as a security team, had to be familiar with that. So we were already spending time in Datadog to look at why do we have so many failing user logins, for example. And then we didn't provide a whole lot of Splunk access to the development teams. So anything that we had for security information was kind of stuck in Splunk in our island. And then we were also noticing some doubled integration costs. We would have to pay twice for certain log types that were egressing from AWS to go to Splunk and then also go to Datadog. And the way the integrations were written for Splunk sometimes were not optimized for the way our environment was configured either. And lastly, we started to notice some learning curve issues as we were building out the team and hiring new people. Splunk is pretty involved in terms of learning to be proficient with the platform. A lot of times you have to attend Splunk trainings. You've got to get familiar with Splunk's specialized query language. And to be fair, I love SPL. It's really great and powerful once you're familiar with it, but it does create a high barrier to entry, especially if it's not your full-time job to be querying all of that data. Because if you don't have time to memorize all the indexes and the functions that you're regularly using, you now have to have a reference sheet to be like, okay, well, where is this data located and what index am I supposed to find it in? And it just created a high barrier for people who are getting introduced to the tool. So as we sort of explored these pain points, we had a conversation with Datadog in kind of the context of our platform engineering team and kind of asked ourselves, well, why not Datadog Cloud SIEM? We've got these pain points. Maybe things would be better with Datadog Cloud SIEM. So as we approached this evaluation to even start considering this question, we had a couple of things that we wanted to validate. These conditions would essentially have to be true for us to justify the investment of moving our SIEM, because that is not a small-scale project. That was going to be 1 to 2 months at least of my team's time fully focused on making that migration work happen. So the first thing is we wanted to be saving time on the administration. This tool was going to have to be easier for us to administer than what we had experienced with Splunk Cloud. The second thing is we wanted a more modern UI and UX. If you've used Splunk Enterprise Security, they haven't updated their UI since probably 2016. You feel it, and for new people who are joining the team, it can be a little obtuse and difficult to understand. How am I supposed to action this data? Where am I supposed to connect the dots? And so we wanted something that felt modern and was really easy to use. Next thing was out-of-the-box detections. We don't have an on-prem environment. We don't have Active Directory. We have primarily SaaS tools with cloud, IDP, and so we wanted a solution that was going to give us really relevant out-of-the-box detections for our organization and the way that our organization was organized. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that this was going to be an improvement as far as consolidated tooling. I don't know that we would have considered this project if there wasn't the consolidation opportunity for us to work with the platform team and our product engineering teams to get onto the same sheet of music, as it were. So as we went through this evaluation process, we started to look at how is Datadog Cloud SIEM operating. We identified several critical log sources we thought were really important to our security program and wanted to draw some conclusions about it against those criteria I just identified. The first thing we noticed was that search times were 5 times faster than what we were seeing in our Splunk Cloud environment. Now, why is that interesting? Because back when we evaluated Splunk Cloud, one of the reasons we selected Splunk versus the competition was that Splunk was the fastest solution. So it was surprising to us to find that Datadog was even faster in the query result timing. The second thing is that the out-of-the-box detections were much more actionable for us. They were relevant. There were things like context about AWS identities and the way those identities were being used that was just very relevant and actionable for our business. We also really liked the way that Datadog handled data ingest. We had auto-detected source types if we had a new source that we were bringing in, and if there was a content pack, which we'll talk more about later, associated with that source type, it would automatically assign that content pack, and it really simplified administration for us. And lastly, I'll note that the SIEM product was fully integrated with Datadog's product. And the reason I mention that is there are a few SIEM products that we've looked at where the SIEM functionality, you have a different set of logging that goes to the SIEM functionality. It's in a different web app. And depending on where your investigation leads you, you may need a log type that's not in the SIEM product. And then you have to go to a different core logging product to investigate and continue to follow that investigative lead. So it's important to me that any product we went to, the SIEM was fully integrated with the core logging experience. So after the evaluation, we decided to move forward with this. We were really happy with what we were seeing. We thought it was a great opportunity. We made the migration from Splunk into Datadog. So the migration in total took us about 2 months. It probably didn't need to take that long because we went over the holidays with it. So that kind of added a little bit of buffer room. But the first piece, and this started before we even signed the contract was identifying all of our key logging sources. And we want to make sure that that is really clearly defined prior to procurement because we don't want any surprises on how much data we need to be ingesting. It'd be really bad to go back to your finance team and be like, ha, I was wrong. We need 30% more money than I originally told you we needed. So you want to be really confident that you have the right amount of data and you give yourself a little bit of buffer because data is always growing. So you want to just keep that room and make sure that you're not going to have any gaps in logging either. I want to validate some assumptions here and make sure that there's not some weird log type that your SIEM is collecting that you're not going to be collecting as you make this migration. After we got the logging sources identified and we started to set those up, we also needed to start looking at role-based access controls. And this was because our platform engineering team had owned the Datadog product and relationship prior to that, and we were about to bring a lot of sensitive data into the platform that we didn't necessarily want exposed to the platform engineering team and the rest of the organization. And so we sat down with them, talked about who are going to be the owners in this platform. We drastically reduced some of the administrative permissions for the platform engineering team and more tailored it to the work they were going to be doing. We added administrative permissions to the security team and started to assign visibility and separation between the various data types based on those who would be accessing the data. After we had that set up, we were confident. We started moving full steam ahead on evaluating how it was performing versus the legacy SIEM. We started to collect all the data and preserve historic data out of our legacy SIEM. We made the decision not to backfill all of our historic Splunk data into Datadog. I think that was partially a cost savings decision, but it also just simplified the process for us. We ended up kind of just leaving everything in S3 in a format that was ready to be rehydrated in Datadog if we ended up needing it at some point. This probably would not take you 4 weeks. It took us a little bit longer because we did our migration around the holidays. So I guess smart tip here, don't migrate your SIEM over Christmas. Cool. All right, last thing is we did some alert tuning. Just, the out-of-the-box detections were really good initially, and we were happy with those. But we just wanted to do a little additional tweaking. We had a couple that we turned off, some that we modified the thresholds on, introduced some of our own alerting that existed on Splunk that we needed to carry over. But that didn't take us very long, and of course, is like detection engineering goes, a continual process. So we finished this migration about 6 months ago now, and what are some of the things that we have noticed? Well, the first and most obvious is the simplified administration, which has resulted in a lot of time savings for us. Some things that are contributing to that time savings, I already mentioned SIEM content packs, and I want to show you a little bit of that because it's something we're really happy with. Technical add-ons were a pain point, and this solves that pain point. Because the SIEM content packs are written by Datadog, and they're very consistent and give us a consistent experience for the supported data types. So you get this view on the supported data types. It gives you a very clear kind of green check mark or a warning whether things are behaving or there's a potential issue. And then once you click into the content pack, you get a lot of consistent detail about the information. In the top right, we get easy access to the documentation, easy access to configurations. With technical add-ons, there sometimes wasn't any documentation. So it's great that there's clear documentation that's written for all of these content packs. We also get a sense of how many detections we have firing for this log type, how many logs we're ingesting from this log type, and then a list of all of our detections. We can create new detections here. We can turn detections off. We can tune them. Very straightforward and seamless UI for us. Next, we have the log pipelines. Not everything's got a content pack, so there are some things that we want to be logging that don't necessarily have out-of-the-box support, but we found the log pipelines and adding that data to be very straightforward and point and click. We kind of just name the processor, we look at some log samples, we're able to select which log we want to be parsing and define what those parsing rules are. And then once we finish writing all those parsing rules, it gets added to a very simple list that's human readable, and we're able to say, all right, this is how we are modifying this data. If I, for some reason, am now looking at the raw log and it's not correlating with what I'm seeing in Datadog, I can go look at this list and figure out what modification that we're making. For example, we're remapping the AWS.account ID field to just account, just for simplified reading. So very easy to kind of understand what's changed here and how it's been manipulated. So those are just two examples of areas where administration is simplified. But overall, how has this changed the process for us? I think we're spending a lot less time on manual resource monitoring. We don't have to go look at what's our compute load in Datadog right now, and what are the most expensive queries we're running, and where is ingest really costing us a lot of compute cycles. So we don't have to worry about that monitoring. We don't have to worry about the technical add-ons and tweaking them. Once we update technical add-ons, we don't have to restart the cluster and notify everyone, hey, we're restarting everything. We don't have to worry about lookup table optimization. There's just a lot of things that are off our plate. And I think we've decided we spend, at minimum, 200 hours per year less administering our SIEM product. And for a team of really 2 people who are doing that work, that's a substantial amount of time. It's like essentially 4 hours a week that they're now able to spend playing video games. Mario Kart World did come out last week. No, actually my boss is in the room, so we're not spending all of the time playing video games. We're spending some, maybe, but most of the time we're doing more important things like process maturity and improvement. We're working with our development teams more to understand what information we can give them that's actionable that helps them build a better MyFitnessPal. We're doing architectural reviews on our backend services so we can understand how our services are intercommunicating and where our data is located and our data lineage. And we're able to focus more on the automations we're building. I mentioned that automation was kind of a first principle for my team. So we're continuing to build out these new processes with automation, improve the existing automations we've already written, and that's continuing to snowball and provide compounding time-saving efforts, all in the service of making sure that my small team is able to continue doing capability development and we don't get held hostage by the operational load that I think sometimes security teams can find themselves with, where it's just all you can do is stay above water with all of the operations you have to maintain, and you don't have time to improve processes anymore. So we have some additional benefits just beyond these. So these are the benefits that mostly impacted my team, but there have been positive benefits for the rest of the organization as well. I mentioned part of the goal here was tool unification. So instead of having things split between Splunk with all of our security logging and Datadog with our production observability, we all now have that in a single platform with a little security enclave with our confidential stuff that my team has access to. But the benefit for the developers is we've been able to add things like the Cloudflare web access logging into Datadog. And now when developers are doing incident response because the service is down or isn't behaving correctly, they have that context and enrichment that has helped them drive to resolution substantially faster. So that's been a big win, and it's helped us as well. If we're doing some investigation, we're able to correlate our security logging with production logs. Been much more straightforward. And as we've brought all of that data together, obviously, it's a lot of data. And so how are we able to afford all of this data and do it in a way that is responsible? And flex logging has been a big unlock for us to make this possible. On Splunk, we had 90 days of accessible data before we had to move things into cold storage. And then once it was in cold storage, rehydrating that took days. And oftentimes, we would have some sort of workaround or solution before we would even bother with this because it was going to be expensive from compute, expensive from time, and it was just such a barrier to entry to even consider rehydrating the data. And now with flex logs, we're able to search our data for our desired retention period, which is 365 days. We don't have to worry about what would we do if we have to rehydrate this old data. And this happened with no increase in our total costs. So there's a really big unlock, and I highly recommend flex logs. They're compatible with Datadog SIEM, and I don't really see a performance reason not to use them. All right, so I want to leave you with some tips for a smooth migration. The first one is that you should run your SIEMs in parallel for as long as you can to try to validate some assumptions. I think that we had a fairly small window of about a month to 2 months that we were trying to do this in, and it was pretty tight. I would not leave yourself less time than that. You want to have this time to make sure that you're not missing data or missing detection or creating gaps for yourselves as you move from your legacy SIEM. So as much time as you can afford, keep them running in parallel, validate those assumptions. The next tip is a little bit of a water is wet thing, but you should plan this project out. I would not do this by the seat of your pants. But especially because this tends to be a really critical Sometimes compliance use case. We want to be very careful with how we handle this, really clearly identify what are we trying to achieve with this migration, what are the various tasks we're going to be responsible for, when do they need to get done by, especially because we've got a contract deadline. At some point, the legacy SIEM has to get shut off. And so we have to be really, think about that critical path and where are we going to be ready to improve and get the next step of the implementation completed. The next thing I'll mention is to leverage your Datadog account team. We had a really great relationship with our Datadog account team, and they were always very responsive, especially during this implementation process. I would not be afraid to reach out to them. So what I'm saying is don't bang your head against the wall wondering how do I solve this, or where is this documentation, or what does this documentation mean? Just go ask for some help. We've been very happy with the documentation. The documentation is great. But do leverage your Datadog account team. Lastly, I think that if you've got unique log types, you shouldn't be afraid to build your own ingest pipelines. We have a couple of weird edge case logs that we like to collect, and we use our automation solution to pipe some of those into Datadog. We have other connectors we've built. But because that log pipeline and ingestion process I showed you is so straightforward and easy, it's really nothing to be afraid of. Just build your own. You don't need to have that integration. It's nice. It gives you some enrichment. It gives you some of that additional context, but really isn't required for the success of your project. So if I was going to leave you with one thing from this talk, it's that if you're a smaller security team that just does not have the resources to be fully managing a SIEM solution, Datadog Cloud SIEM can help you manage really large data problems on that smaller scale by simplifying the collection, simplifying the monitoring, and simplifying the administration for your team. So thank you very much for your attention. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Hey, how's it going? Can you speak more on how you isolated the security logs, all the security things that they need to see that nobody else should be seeing? Yeah, it sounds like you did some role-based access control, great. But how did, in my experience, all Datadog logs are mixed together? Did you do special tagging to isolate things? How did that work actually?
Yeah, I think that we, and you're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong here, but we created separate indexes, and the security logging goes into a set of security indexes, the production logging goes in a different set of indexes, and then we assigned access to the indexes. So this is like, this user has access to these following indexes. Obviously, we have a handful of people that are in ownership roles or super administrative roles who are gonna have access to everything, just by nature of the way the tool behaves. But that was part of the coming together with the platform engineering team to decide how do we narrow that list of people that are gonna have that super administrative access across the entire tenant.
Cool, and another, follow-up. So you're talking about how you're building log parsers through the logging pipelines. Sometimes things don't come out exactly how you expect them or how you want to see them. But there is also you doing, building your own ingest. Where would you say is the line between where are the two use cases actually there? What did you have to build for an ingest, I guess? What was the use case that you had to build an ingest for?
Yeah, I think a use case for us was our automation platform. We have some logging for the automations that we've written, and it's like a custom log type. And so we need to centralize that, normalize the logging, and then after it's sent to Datadog, how do we want to be parsing that field in a way that's useful and relevant down into the future. So nothing like cosmic, I don't think. It's just kind of like how are we normalizing it for stuff that we've built our own custom tooling. How do we normalize that in a way that's useful?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Alan, I had a question.
Sure.
You've got a small team. You have a lot of demands. Where did you find yourself saying no during this process?
I think, well, first off, with talking with the Datadog team, I said no a lot on just the one-to-one, is this going to cost exactly the same as what I'm paying for the SIEM? Because it's going to be expensive for me to make the transition. And so that was kind of a significant negotiation point for us, was just thinking about what is the total cost to my team to be making the migration. I think we also had to think about our alerting and detections and what was really important for us to carry over and what data enrichment was really important for us to carry over versus what did we want to just leave on the cutting room floor and rediscover as we used the new tool. So there was a little bit of trade-off that potentially happened there as well.
You were saying automation, and I'm wondering how many repos do you have for automating things in Datadog? Is it dashboards, monitors? Is it one repo for agent deployment or integrations? Like, is it a monolithic repo and just all Datadog, throw everything in there?
So we don't have a whole lot of automation for what's happening with Datadog specifically. Like I'm talking about our entire security program. We use a low-code automation solution called Tines, primarily, and we have probably about 100 stories in Tines, different actions and things that we're automating. So I wouldn't say that it's like a single repo or a monolith that is doing that. I think some of the things we're automating out of Datadog is like reporting for cloud security posture stuff. We'll like pull that in and create Jira tickets and add some additional context for our business around those Jira tickets. For alerting if we're firing off PagerDuty or something like that for a critical alert, and then notifying people in Slack. So fairly straightforward.
You get to write a letter to Alan from a year ago. What do you want to tell him?
I think that I had a lot of trepidation about this. This was like a big undertaking, and it felt like something that was already a solution. Like we had a SIEM already. Why are we going to spend 2 months when we could be doing something else to make this transition to the SIEM? I don't think I appreciated at the time how much we would be saving in administration. I think we had a sense that we would be saving in administration and a sense that we were going to get some wins from tool unification. I don't think we realized how much. So I guess I would tell myself, like, don't be afraid. We had a lot of wins out of this. It ended up being worth the time investment that we made.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Sorry.
In my org, we're very much a Splunk shop still. We're using Datadog for monitoring, so there is the disjointed nature now. But if I was to, let's say, present to security team, upper management, and we want to move our SIEM, let's say, to Datadog, what are some things you potentially lost in that transition? Like, did you lose any functionality or anything that kind of haunts you still, or did everything kind of just work one way or another?
I don't know that anything haunts me at MyFitnessPal. I would say at other organizations I've worked at, I potentially would have had some more concerns. I do think depending on the amount of data that you're ingesting, there is a level of granularity you can get to with Splunk in terms of like how are we treating this data, and how, like, is there stuff we want to drop before we actually ingest it? Do we want to do some additional tagging? How much do we have invested in things like lookup tables and our risk-based alerting and all of the various assets and identities? Like, we didn't have all of that built out in Splunk necessarily. We kind of had it externalized in other systems. So I guess it really depends on how bought in you are to the Splunk ecosystem and how much customization, if you've got a Splunk team, they've done to really optimize how the product is behaving for you. Because especially if you're running on-premise Splunk, there's a lot of under-the-hood play that you've got that you wouldn't necessarily have with a solution like this.
So you're saying like the pre-processing stuff, that's not really possible with the Datadog SIEM. Like if you, like Splunk heavy forwarders, that's like drop data that's matching XYZ before you even send it kind of thing. That's not really a feature that's supported, or?
I would have to get back to you on whether or not it's supported or not. I just don't think it is for our use case, but
We use
Cody.
observability pipelines.
Okay, observability.
There's already stuff built into Datadog that'll let you discard
Okay.
logs before ingestion, so that you don't ever, they never even come in, and you stop paying for them that way.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks, Cody.
we use Vector.
Yeah.
We use Vector, which is like open source thing, and that's how we discard stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You talked a bit about migrating, but if you were starting from scratch, are there any particular tools that you would recommend or tips in general?
Like starting from scratch with like just the entire SIEM, like building a security program from scratch, or
Right,
like.
with an app you're setting up to be ready when you need those requirements, what would you do in the beginning? Or what tools would you use to make sure you're in a place to succeed once you get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are probably some compliance tools like Drata and so forth that if you were trying to track, like, do we have this sort of information that we're collecting based on, various policies we set for ourselves or regulations that we're trying to follow, and stop me if I'm like totally off base from what you're asking. But
Yeah, I think
go
you're
ahead.
good. Keep going.
Okay. So I think I'd recommend that. I think also having some sort of low-code solution, or if you have a team that's not appropriate for and you want to be writing your own thing, being able to keep track of what have we brought on board and what are the data sources that we care about. I think something that can be very time-consuming and have surprises is that identifying the ingest sources piece. And so if you're jumping into a business that already has a lot of infrastructure, there could be potentially like 50 SaaS tools, how many authentication solutions. You may have a lot of different places you've got to look to and go to. If you're building out piece by piece, I would like start documenting like, here's all the places that we're eventually going to have logging from. Here's the log types we need. And if we've got the time for it, let's figure out how we get those various log types so that when you are ready to bring on a SIEM or some sort of centralized logging solution, you've got this list totally prepared for yourself, and you've got some confidence that you're bringing all those things in and are ready to roll.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, given you have a small team, do you think you'll use the new Bits AI agent for SIEM?
Yeah, I don't know. That's something we've been talking about. I think probably if you had asked us a year ago, we would have said absolutely not. I think the way things are advancing, we're like building some confidence in a solution like that. I think there's obviously some fear and doubt around, is this going to create like a forensics tool situation where you bias towards, oh, my forensics tool didn't tell me this, therefore it doesn't exist on the disk. And that may not necessarily be true. So I think part of it is a confidence building exercise. And maybe like with spot checking and so forth, we get a little more confident in the solution. I think the flip side of that as well, though, is our industry has been so focused on this concept of alert fatigue, and how do we reduce alert fatigue, and how do we make sure we have this super high fidelity alerts that aren't going to contribute to alert fatigue. If you've got an AI agent that potentially allows you to get maybe a little sloppier with alerts, or at least gets us to a position where we can throw in some lower fidelity alerts that are only going to be relevant 1 out of 10 times. It's okay if you've got a machine that's processing all of that and trying to flag alerts that are relevant. It may give us an opportunity to expand the total range of things that we're choosing to alert on. But I guess I think it's a combination of both things. You got to build that confidence, but then also like how do we rethink detection and response in that context as well.
Actually, last call. Don't make me look silly.
Before we wrap really quick, I do want to say thank you to my team, James, Melissa, Caleb. They did a lot to help me understand everything here and to do the implementation. So this is their work as well, and so thank you to them.
I have a
Yeah.
one last question. So
Sure.
you mentioned that Splunk's syntax is a little bit difficult, but to my understanding, Datadog also has its own syntax. Was it hard to just like switch over?
Datadog does have its own syntax that's available, but they also have like some natural language solutions, and then also kind of like builders where you can build out and it auto-completes the field and so forth. Splunk autocomplete, if you don't have the search in your search history, doesn't quite work in a fully featured way. And there's a lot of data manipulation and evaluation that you essentially have to do via piped commands. And in Datadog, it's fairly straightforward to just kind of like in the UI do that. So that is available for you if you want to be doing that sort of query language work in Datadog, but there also is this much more straightforward builder option.
Thank you so much, Alan.
All right, thank you everybody, appreciate it.